Okay, so welcome everybody to Rendezvous with John and Jamie McGlue and Grace McGlue, although she's not here in the room, she is next door. So I've just been blessed with a child, and so my father is here to discuss with me becoming a father and what fatherhood's all about, or something like that. So thanks for being here, Dad, in every
Yeah, yeah, thank you. It's really nice. It's strange speaking to you from the other side of the world. I'm in a hotel room in Melbourne,
Yeah.
in Victoria, Australia, which is just about as far away as you can get from Dublin, Ireland. So I grew up in Dublin, moved to Australia when I was 24, 36 years ago, 36 years ago. And then one of my beloveds ends up living in Dublin and has his first child and my third grandchild. And I can't wait to see Grace when I get to meet her in a few weeks. First of all, tell me, how is Johanna and Grace? How's Mum and the bub? They're all good?
Yeah, they are all good. Yeah. Johanna's doing amazing and blooming like a radiant flower, I would say. And the baby's doing great as well. Very adorable and kind of hilarious in small ways, just like doing little things. I don't know if it's like some parenting instinct where you're like, they smash your most prized possession. You're like, oh, that's so cute. Some evolutionary thing to make us take care of them. But no, I think it's just like something about them. They're so like I don't know. Yeah, there's something I can't put my finger on, but so yeah, just be really amusing in small little ways. And so she'll be, like seems like life is so new to her, so that like she'll be even just there's a certain level of discomfort with this dimension. Just like, what's going on? What's this feeling in my belly? But so she'll go in a wave between that kind of thing, which we soothe her out of. Oh, it's okay. And then just being kind of like, well, looking around, just being so open, and so it's just so fun. Like, we talk to her or play, sing her some music or something, and Johanna's yeah, like kind of had like more or less like the perfect birth as far as we're concerned, and healing really well, and so feeling very blessed. And
It's a great time for everybody. The magic and the joy and the happiness spreads right throughout the family and friends, and it's new for everybody. What's that first week been like for you, Jamie? I worked out that as we speak, Grace is a week and several hours old.
yeah,
How has that first week been for you as a dad?
good question. So well, I think my I'd say sleepy. um yeah, nah, how's my first week been? Well, cosmic. I'll just throw some adjectives: sleepy, cosmic, beautiful, um uh meaningful, um it, easy in a way, like someone well, yeah, I think because just like I knew, I'm just like totally committed and like, yeah, whatever's needed. So it's one of those things where once someone at the cafe is like, oh, how's it been, hard, and I'm like, not really. Really? I was like, well, I don't know, I'm kind of sleepy, but just do what you have to do. It's great. But overall, I'd say, how has it been? I'd say uh yeah, it's been kind of yeah, obviously it's a new chapter in my life, but it's a chapter I was looking forward to from like a pretty young age, and but, but so I've been off work, I'm just at home with, you know, the missus and the wee little baby. And it's kind of, yeah, been kind of just a very simple kind of grounding thing, and just being there, like, you know, whatever the baby needs, like, I'm there. And so in a funny way, I think some people might think like, oh my God, being a father, that sounds terrifying and so much responsibility. But I think what's terrifying and has so much pressure is maybe like not like I think maybe it's, there's, in a way it's almost, it's less terrifying, there's less pressure having a baby, because it just grounds you into, oh, it's, life's very simple. Take care of this person, and then in all the spare time, do whatever you want, you know?
Yeah, it's a big change. What do you think has surprised you most?
What surprised me most? Geez. So this is where the
So
lack
how
of
you
deep sleep comes into play. My mind.
What surprised me most is the way I've got trouble stringing a sentence together anymore, because I've
Exactly.
had a I've had a an accumulation of 8 hours sleep in a week.
Yeah. I'd say what surprised me is that I haven't been surprised. Just kidding. No, I'm
Yep.
just trying to throw paradoxes out there. What has actually surprised me? Let's see.
Well, let me ask it another way, because I think it sounds like it's been overwhelmingly amazing, the experience, and I think you're incredibly lucky because Johanna is gorgeous and beautiful and is very grounded as a person. So you've got a great partner to do this
Yeah, definitely.
with. And I know from the the youngest age, you're 31 now, but from a pretty young age, you'd always considered what was important. I remember you talking to me about this, but what you considered important in terms of when you become a dad. And I think you always look forward to that. I think you're pretty fortunate um, that it's at this time and place and in this setting. I think it's been overwhelmingly positive. That's my perception of it. And I guess I remember back when you and your twin brother Mark were born, and Alex before that. You can't plan or legislate for this stuff. Just about in every aspect of life, you can sit down and you can, particularly nowadays with the internet being abundant, and with the dawn of Chat GPT and Auto GPT, well,
Yeah.
anything is possible. But we kind of, I think, in many aspects of our lives, try to measure our life in coffee spoons. We plan everything to within an inch.
Yeah.
But when it comes to parenthood, well, gee, how do you do that? It's
Yeah.
coming, the emotions, the logistics, the physical demands, the emotional demands they're abundant. So, but I it's sometimes small things that give you kind of great happiness in those early days and weeks. We just go, holy hell! It
Yeah.
kind of dawns on you that this is a very, very big thing, and it's an extension of yourself, and you're an extension of me and your mum Barbara,
Yeah.
and
But are you an
and when,
extension of me?
well, yeah, well, there's been a lot of reverse engineering going on, as we know, but we can talk about that another time.
Didn't take into account reincarnation.
Reverse osmosis.
Yes.
So, uh, but it's sometimes those small things that surprise and bring great joy, and that never changes as a parent, not in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Is
Um,
that different for you though, in terms of how you felt in this first week compared to what you perceived it might be like?
yeah, good question. I think not really. Like, I think, like, kind of similar to your question about, like, you know, what surprised me. I think kind of like the way I approached it is, you know, I used to overthink things, and now I just think things. So maybe sometimes I overthink them, but like my general way of doing things is to be a little bit like obsessive in like trying to understand things. So I was already going, okay, what's it going to be like? What's it going to be like? And what should I do? And so then I was kind of came to the conclusion like, oh yeah, I think it's just like one of those threshold things, like Morpheus in the Matrix. I can show you show you the door, but only you can walk through it. So oh yeah, I think like you can't understand it until you become a father or become a parent.
Yeah. And
Um,
there's no optionality around blue pill or red pill.
oh
Doesn't
yeah,
exist.
yeah,
The die is cast.
yeah. So I kind of felt like, yeah, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and so I kind of expected the unexpected. And so then I guess haven't really been too surprised, but more just like open to just like yeah, like oh it's true what they say, like at least for now. I think maybe I'm still optimistic. I'm kind of stubborn slash optimistic in that like longer term. I'm like no, I'm going to get good sleep. Oh yeah, or whatever, but in the short term for sure, like no, baby needs food, baby needs to have a nappy change, so not getting too much
Let me just gaze into the crystal ball for a moment
fun.
and maybe just give you a little taste of what's to come. The sleep thing, and not a lot of it in the first number of years. Around
Yeah.
about 4 or 5, something really surprising will happen, and she will sleep for 10 hours,
Mm.
from 7 o'clock at night until 5 in the morning, or 11 hours. And after about 4 or 5, you'll be going in to check her every half an hour. So that's kind of like a false dawn in terms of a good night's sleep. When they get to about 7 or 8, they'll get some good sleep. Then by the time the early teens come on, loud music starts, which hopefully you have given her and exposed her to in the first place. And then as the mid-teens and the late teens come, well, then you're going to be having sleepless nights again, worried about where the hell she is and who the hell is that who's dating her and
Yeah.
all of that. It's all ahead. So it's episodic and it's cyclical. It's not a kind of a linear kind of move away from sleepless nights. It'll come and go at you, mate, for quite a while, and
We'll see.
it's
We'll
wonderful.
see. That's all I
We'll
got.
see.
This is a funny thing. It's like, say, with like also listening to the experience of those who've come before you, and the wisdom of the elders, so to speak. And then also kind of, and I think there's a lot of benefit in that. But then also kind of being able to follow your own intuition with certain things, and say like around the baby, there's been certain things where it's like, oh, they say you're meant to do this. And I'll be like, really? And but it's been good that like say Johanna and myself, like we don't always see eye to eye on things at first, but we always communicate, we always talk. And so we'll just research things and talk it through, and maybe we might have some uncomfortable conversations for a while, but then we're slowly edging forth from these two perspectives. So you're kind of getting three-dimensional view of something. And and so it could be like, the view is tradition versus your own intuition, or it could be two different traditional, people, two different cultures or something. But I think that's been another interesting thing about becoming a parent is like, say, weighing up like what I think, say, you would suggest, or what I would think, or what Johanna would, or what someone else would think. And then, but yeah, for sure, there are certain things like I would not be shocked if it turns out like sleep, it goes on an interesting journey for a while, but that's fine, whatever. But
And it is, the communication thing is vitally important. And Johanna is from the Czech Republic. You're from Australia. Both of you have come together living in countries which isn't the country of your birth or your upbringing or your education. And it's a whole lot of stuff, not having big family structures around, not having your mum and dad, and for example, close by.
yeah.
The same with Johanna, not living in the same country. It's bloody hard. And
Yeah.
it's really. So the good communication is obviously, self-evident, vitally important. But the other thing which becomes a challenge, and you touched on it, is where you say people give you advice about this is what you're supposed to do with a baby as a parent. And we'll get to the dad's thing, I'm sure, because there's a huge amount of pressure, I think, on on blokes to be a certain way and behave in a certain way, and as largely that is welcome and desired. The pressure on dads now, I think, is enormous. Pressure on parents is enormous. But the bit where people are saying you should do this or that for a kid, 1, 2, 3, one of the challenges is that many times what you think instinctively is kind of the right thing to do. We all go off and we research stuff, and you kind of reach the sooner you reach the conclusion that you don't have all the answers, the better, is probably a plain English way of describing it. And the clever thing to do is to identify from whom and from where you get good advice.
Yeah. Who do you listen to?
Yeah. Who do you listen to? In our experience, child health nurses are really good. They are just amazing people whose kindness and professional wisdom and generosity and goes way beyond a job. It's way beyond it. It's a great profession, and take my hat off to people who are good at it. And they're great source of really good advice and really good information, and an example of the importance of picking and choosing from whom and from where you get advice. Yeah. Luckily, there's billions of people who've gone before you, and since you were born, 30 and a bit years ago, the advances in medical science, the advances in behavioral science, advances in education are enormous. Not all of the developments, I think, are good in terms of the pressures that now come on kids to do things. I mean, I think Grace will be a computer coder before she's 10, maybe before she's 5. But there's such a body of assistance and information, and that's why it's available. It's just she's been born at a good time in that regard, and good for her parents too, because those sources of help and so forth are abundant.
Yeah, I think it's so a blessing and then a curse in some ways, like where just that the whole in general in something we deal with, like in societies, like was it paralysis by analysis, that kind of thing, and just kind of information overload. And so it makes it harder in a way because you have to pick through the information. But yeah, ultimately it's a blessing, because if you just put in the time, then you will be able to kind of figure out with your intuition of who do you listen to, and who can you trust, whatever, and who's got authority and expertise. You can kind of sift through things and find, kind of compare, these persons, and anything I'm not sure about, I look up one side and then I look up the other side and I just go back and forth. I think.
Yeah, I do it slightly differently. Because of again the abundance of information, and because of the fact that if I go looking to prove a certain hypothesis, I can readily do it 100 times over.
Yeah.
Through sources that I'll find online. But ultimately, I don't do that game of research ping pong.
Yeah.
I go to people whose expertise I trust, and I short circuit the whole thing for two reasons. One, because people are expert in those areas, and I'm happy to rely upon their expertise. And secondly, I don't have time.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, which is probably something I'm experiencing more and more as I'm more of a family man. But I would say my basic thing there is what I wanted to just say there is, like, I think ultimately the answer is to ask questions, like just stay open to information,
Yeah, and it's amazing in general discourse, and this is a broader point, but it's an interesting one in relation to discussions around parenthood. And that is, you'll notice in general conversation with people you bump up against, it's always good, interesting kind of measure to take of how often they talk and how often you talk.
Yeah.
that balance, because it tells you a lot of things. People are talking 90% of the time. They can't be listening.
Yeah.
And there's a respect thing which comes in as well. But also the number of times that people ask questions of other people.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk, but the amount of time that people will kind of sit and having a conversation with whoever it might be. In your case, it might be, a child health nurse or a doctor
Yeah.
or an educator about grace. But the number of you just watch and listen, and you will see the number of just such a high incidence of people talking and talking and talking like I am right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but then there's a balance, right? We need to talk. It's like expression and experience, kind of yin and yang, the active and the passive, the giving and the receiving. And I think, yeah, good information flow, you kind of need a bit of both. You need to kind of, in any field, but yeah, but speaking of asking questions, so let me ask you a question. So what would you say? So, it seems like, and stands to reason that your experience of fatherhood has changed over time and it's still, an evolving thing. And now you've got, grandfatherhood, which I guess is a whole other experience. And you've had that for a few years now. But like say fatherhood, what was that experience like for you? And if you can make any general comments, that's good, but at least just for you, like psychologically or kind of spiritually, or just any Ali you want to talk about. Yeah, how was that for you, that change,
It was quite enormous because it happened not long after I had moved my life from being a young kid in Ireland to living and working and essentially growing up in Australia and properly growing up. And Alex arrived, within a couple of years. And it was, a profound kind of change in terms of I had, for the first time in my hands, because I was adopted as a child, I had for the first time in my hands a kind of living being who was part of who I am, who was a blood relative.
Mm-hmm.
So that was quite a profound
Right.
thing. The fact that there was this utter total reliance on mum primarily, but mum and dad for the well-being of the child is overwhelming. The bringing of the start of a new life is something which I find deeply moving. And I think that to me was incredibly emotional experience, and I kind of um, started leaping forward, thinking, how what is this child? What kind of life is this child gonna have? And tried to reflect when I had spare time, I guess, and subliminally, this sort of subconsciously, this happened. We start thinking about what kind of dad do I want to be? Basic instincts, kind of, I remember kicking in. And it was certainly the case when you and Mark came along, that you want to be a provider. You start thinking about protecting, about providing for. You start thinking about wanting to make life as good as possible for your children. In my case, I really wanted the life of my children, my sons, to be. I wanted to have for them to have every opportunity in life, and maybe have opportunities that weren't available to me when I was growing up. In very different circumstances. So I think I strangely, when I think about it, but a lot of what I wanted to do was to be a father who provided, who protected, and you say that my sense of fatherhood has evolved. It's evolved and mutated. it's and and I was thinking about our discussion and you becoming a dad, and the same when Alex became a dad. about what what makes for a good dad, and it's stuff like just spending. I mean, I think that what I would do differently, I would spend a lot more time. I'd be a lot more present with my kids. I mean, you talked before about not paralysis by analysis, and I mean, one of the things with which you and Mark have spoken to me at great length about is about the importance of being present.
Yeah.
You know, you can't really change too much about yesterday, and
Mm-hmm.
the other reality is today. Get as present as you can, and that's going to make a difference. And the extension of that for fatherhood is that you're present with your children. And I would do that differently if I had my time again, because I think that as much time as you possibly can spend with your children is just, it's the best time you're ever going to have. And that time from when a child is born, like Grace a week ago, to when she's 21, that's going to go in the blink of an eye. You won't. That time just flies, and
He's already,
yeah,
we've been
time
talking.
accelerates. Time accelerates, and when you get to my age, it accelerates at a great rate of knots. But I think when I think about, I guess one thing also being my experience of being a dad was a lot of the time and you can't really do this. This is probably not the best thing to do, where you project onto your children what you would like them to do, what you think they should do. Well, they're really smart kids. They should become a whatever.
Yeah.
And I know I encouraged you and Alex to study law, and he, and you started studying law and then decided that philosophy and politics were more interesting. Alex stayed with it, but that whole essence of me saying, well, look, I think you've got to be careful not to project onto your children what you think they should be, or give them great expectations. I think you nurture, you educate Grace to within an inch of a life. You know, you just, education is everything. Socialize well, make her confident, self-reliant. Health is such a big thing. But in that optionality is going to be the big thing. We've got another kind of industrial revolution underway now, and you know, all of us are going to have multiple jobs and what have you. Optionality with a child is really important, to make sure that they have maximum amount of optionality, not the option that you want for them, but the options that may be needed or that she might think about in 3 years' time that she wants. So I think that's pretty vital. We're in a kind of a strange world, you know, where a lot of things are changing, fast moving, and there's some great substantial events happening in the world, which are going to happen during Grace's lifetime. And for that reason, I think geography is important. I think you should come back and live in Australia, but that's only because I'm being really selfish. But I think it's increasingly complex now. It was more simple, I think, when I became a dad, because, you know, you earn money, you protect, there were less external influence. Social media didn't exist. The internet didn't exist.
Yeah.
Let alone AI and everything else that's coming. So I think getting the settings is right for your child is a bit more complex now than it was for me. Geography is important. You know, where you're physically settled, the environment of which somebody gets to live and grow up is increasingly important. Optionality, health, friends, family. Ultimately, it comes back to family and friends, you know, ultimately. And
yeah, it's like they say it takes a village to raise a child, and they also say, you know, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and it's not entirely true, you know, but like, speaking to the massive influence we have on those we regularly are around, you kind of fall into resonance. And so, yeah, I think definitely that's the case with your physical setting, like geography, and, you know, more importantly, the culture of the area you're in, the way, what they value.
vitally important. What
Yeah.
have you thought about this, Jimbo? Have you thought about what kind of dad you want to be?
Oh yeah, definitely.
What have you reflected?
Well, good question there, Jonathan. So I think, well, kind of in a nutshell, I mean, I want to be a present dad. Like, so the past and the future don't really exist except as abstractions, as you were mentioning there. So I want to be present and kind of that's the main thing. Live in the now, and then everything that already is, avoiding a lot of unnecessary, you know, mediocrity. Um, but yeah, I want to be a conscious father, kind father, a protecting father, definitely like that. Those instincts are kicked in of like, just, okay, bring in resources and like, oh, you're just so sweet and beautiful and amazing and like, so full of potential. Like, oh my God, what are you going to be like when looking at pictures of Johanna when she's a baby and be like, and here she is now. And I know that she was that little baby was a bud full of the potential of that, life to grow. And like, okay, Grace is going to be the same. She's not going to be a baby forever. Look, she's going to be some, character full of personality. And okay, what's it going to be? And so it's, I want to protect and kind of nourish and provide. And it does, like you're saying, so if you mentioned a few interesting things I want to comment on, but so it does definitely feel like, I think my generation, yours probably more than the previous generation again, and then mine even more, and then the generation after me, like even more, like, my beautiful niece and nephew, or Grace, generation. But it's like being pulled further and further out of the real world into this kind of virtual world, and then also just abstractions of just, if you get highly educated, it's possible to start living in a world of ideas. And it's like you used to say, oh, it would be, it's good to work in service industries for a bit. You get a feeling for like the way the nuts and bolts of the world a bit, which I think is very true. And working as a kitchen hand was helpful for me. And you treat those kinds of people with much more respect after that. But I think fatherhood's one of those things where it kind of grounds you into kind of like the real world. And so it's a good balancing against some of these forces of like this new economy and way of life, which is developing with technology. But just about as a father, so, I want to be, nice, and I want to be, useful and all this. But I think the core of it is kind of like what, is something I wanted to mention about what you said just before, which is like, you don't want to project onto your children. You don't want to live vicariously through them, or you don't want to like, project onto them, like, influence them, like do what I want to do. But I think that's a paradox there. That's a thing where actually you do want to do that, but not too much. And so it's kind of a thing where you could take it the wrong way and say, like the thing of the pendulum swinging this way too far, that way too far, but it slowly finds balance. It seems like through the generations, families are experiencing life and challenges and kind of learning, and then maybe they pass on, to their children. They want them to be a little bit better than them. And maybe it's not in every aspect, but in most aspects, the child is more adaptive than the parent. And then they pass on, some nonsense to their kids, but mostly they pass on, more adaptive behavior. But I feel like what is the balance, do you think, between kind of, because it seems like you do want to guide, and fathers especially, seems like in a nutshell, mothers are more like accepting, nourishing, ground them with love. Fathers are more like guidance, exposure, kind of encourage them to grow and develop in healthy patterns. So what do you think is the correct balance there between, you don't want to do nothing, right?
You don't want to, absolutely. I'll tell you two very specific ways in which you want to influence. That's music and literature.
But... Oh yeah, you did very well with that. Yeah.
Oh, I do remember some of the albums that were thrown back at me when I handed them over first. What is this rubbish?
Yeah.
Like OK Computer by Radiohead and
yeah,
Moan's live album, rubbish.
Yeah.
Gee. And then I thought to myself, where did I go wrong? I thought I was doing all the right things. Look, I think that word sounds very cold and sterile, optionality. But what I mean by that is you need to make sure that your kids don't go down a single path, especially one you've chosen for them, and leave a lot of emotional money on the table, and don't. I think you should expose them to as many different things as possible. They'll make up their own mind eventually. I always thought around, you guys were growing up, having interesting different people around the dinner table was pretty important. People from kind of all walks of life. My people who were highfalutin lawyers and business people, people who were scaffolders and tradies who were my very, very close mates from the rugby club, people who were musicians, politicians, poor people, well-off people, just a whole range of people, straight people, gay people. And I remember at one point when you guys were in your teens, and I remember mentioning somebody's name about somebody who was famous or something. You were going, no, I don't really care. Yeah, I know who they are. Yeah, I've met them, but I couldn't really care about them really. And I thought at that time, well, that was pretty good, because so many people would just get stars in their eyes at times like that, and you guys couldn't give a rat's, didn't care.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of
And I
funny.
think I think exposing people to as many different sources and ways of life and walks of life as possible is really important. It also grounds people, because people can get carried away and get highfalutin notions about themselves, and that's rubbish.
Yeah. And I think, you did a great job of that as well, like bring a lot of diversity of people into contact with us to kind of, and that's a great way of kind of showing potential patterns of behavior. And then, like you say, it's up to the kids if they want to take anything on, but you're kind of trusting in common sense there, and having faith in them that they'll find the music that works for them, they'll find the books that work for them, and the kind of personality. And we would, like, you love, kind of just meeting people, and you're very outgoing, and so you'd be, it was kind of nice to, like, you would be in contact with some people who are more well known or whatever, but it was always just like, they're just people. And I think that's one thing, like, because that very precious thing I got from you is kind of realizing, like, I think some people have limitations put upon themselves, and I think maybe in Ireland you had so many limitations put upon you that you kind of, like, the Hulk just like burst free of them, and we're like, and then maybe that's where that kind of you gained that, maybe because I don't know, or maybe it was just native to you already. But
no, I think it might have been native but unexplored, and I think you're absolutely right. I found Ireland in the early mid-80s a very dark, reactionary, conservative, feudal society, and there's no way that I could have had the career or life that I had if I'd stayed in Ireland. I want to come back on one thing when we talk about the balance and the extent to which you kind of impose yourself. I think if you sit and read a book to Grace every night and get into the habit of getting into the special confessional, almost into a sacred space where you can get to with your child, and you do that by being present and being ever present and being always there and giving them your unswerving attention when you're in that position with them, I think that's something which I think is utterly valuable. And I know you will do that, because you're a great writer. You're a huge consumer. You've got a huge appetite for reading, for literature, especially.
Yeah.
And so I think I've no doubt that you will do that. But from a fatherhood thing, from a parenting thing, getting into that really safe space with a child, making Grace and other kids that follow, and do keep me posted on further developments, please. Thank you. That having the ability to get into that space with your children, which is a sort of a sacred space, is really, really important. The only way it can happen is through time and attention and a shared respect.
Yeah.
And I've no doubt you are a brilliant dad, and I think you will be an extraordinary dad to Grace because of your force of personality and your generosity of spirit, which are enormous. And Johanna's just extraordinary. She's such a beautiful woman, and she has got such a gorgeous demeanor. You're pretty damn lucky you are, and that baby is very lucky to have you guys as parents.
Thank you very much. To the list of compliments you've thrown me, I'd like to add one more, which would be my humility. I think is a very important thing, which maybe
I've always said that. I just simply didn't want to raise it because I didn't want you to speak for 7 or 8 or 9 minutes on your humility, which is well known, and which is
humility.
Which has really been. I mean, you've spoken about that in I think round about 44 or 50 podcasts. So I mean, look, I really feel it's an area we should cover too much more.
Yeah, but I think in all seriousness, though, I think that's a helpful thing, like, which I should mention, which is like, I'm aware that, like, yeah, of course I'm going to make mistakes. And I think this is something I want to talk about in another podcast soon. But also, I'd like to talk to you about politics soon, by the way, in another podcast, and the future of the world. But that, like, yeah, I'm aware I'm going to make mistakes. And so I think if you want to avoid making mistakes, you need to accept that you're going to make them. And then you're no longer internally divided, and you're no longer wasting energy on being tense about it. You can use that extra energy to deal with, trying to be more competent. And so I'm kind of with Grace.
I wish I could have done a lot more of that.
Yeah,
a lot more. So I think if you're very aware of that, I think that's an outstanding thing.
Yeah, and yes, and so you do the best you can, and I think in a nutshell, what I want for her is to I want her to be her own person and to explore her own soul and and experience herself and express herself, experience life, express life, and have a rich life, full of happiness and connection and all that. But I think I do want her grounded in tradition, and I want her to kind of be well read. I want her to have heard a lot of music. I want her to kind of be a Renaissance woman, where she is this multi-talented, like multilingual Baba
Polymath.
person. Sorry, polymath. Yeah. And then she doesn't need to stick with it if she doesn't want. But I think that's the thing, exposing them to that and having that that foundation of just connection to the human story and that kind of cosmic perspective of, like, you're here to enjoy yourself, but and life is about enjoyment and joy, but you're also here to love, and in the end the love you take is equal to the love you make, as the Beatles put it. And so I think that's a beautiful thing to ground. I think these days kids maybe could benefit from having more structure, something Jordan Peterson talks about. And part of that is understanding you're on a beautiful, heroic quest to uplift the world because it's full of malevolence and suffering. And so if you've got that as a backdrop, then you can be less neurotic and more just like, yeah, I do my work to be responsible. And then within that, like I am as a father, and then whatever's left over, that's for you to enjoy. And, so, but yeah,
I've got a quick final question for you before I
please do
head out and battle the hordes in the centre of Melbourne.
Good.
What type of music are you playing to send Grace to sleep? And of course, that's a trick question, because embedded in that is the tricky issue of whether you're playing her music to send her to sleep.
Well, I'm playing her and singing her music, not just to send her to sleep, but just for, just to let her know that that's what life is. Life is music. But
from which volume of your greatest hits are you are you taking most material? Volume 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, good question. I think they're all great. I couldn't choose between them. But no, I am
There's
like
there's that humility thing again.
humility kicks in. But I've been making up songs. I always play a bit of music, so I'll just very quickly we'll just play a tiny hook from the guitar here. This is, like she was like kind of crying. I was trying to chill her out. And so this is a little something, I'm gonna make, and it's Grace, come to me. Don't tell me your reality. Unless it's golden. All right, give me a lead somehow. Out of me is all I need. A family, baby, please. Ireland, Australia, Bohemia, everyone knows that Jesus was a savior, but you are much more than that to me. Something.
Oh, that's from the heart.
And in direct answer to your question, basically, I'm practicing Irish, so often I will sing to her in Irish to practice my Irish well, because I like the idea of her maybe connecting with that language and having that. So that's kind of like, and sometimes it's kind of nonsense, but I'm stretching my ability to think in Irish by like I'll sing these like long. I'll just slow down the words if I'm where do I go? I'll just slow it down and then find another word. So I'm kind of thinking while singing her lullabies in Irish most of the time.
So, and don't forget the lullabies are available. The rock lullabies you can get
Volume
if you're
32 onwards.
Radiohead. Yeah.
Yeah, for a very,
So,
very reasonable price. And Dad, so thank you for joining me. Yeah, I know you've got to go and
pleasure.
take care of business as you want to do. So, any final comments to those out there, maybe considering becoming a father or who have just become a father? Any final words?
I want to say this. I think you are remarkably lucky that we've been able to sit and talk for close to an hour and we haven't heard one baby scream as yet. So that's quite extraordinary. That's good. And don't change a bit, Jamie. You're a magnificent example of somebody who will be a great father, is a great father already, and a great partner to your fiance.
Thank
So I
you.
look forward to seeing you in a few weeks,
Yep,
and
indeed.
it will be great to see you all
Yeah,
and give Grace the hug and the love that we can't
yeah.
wait to deliver.
And I'm very grateful. You've been a great father, and I think you're a great embodiment of that, guiding, but then also like in balance with accepting, and so to any other fathers or would-be fathers, I would say, yeah, kind of the same thing of accept yourself as you are, don't change, but then also change, like, accept yourself as you are. And then from that foundation of relaxation, you can grow and encourage yourself to do what's needed. But yeah, I'm on the journey. We'll see how it goes, do my best and enjoy it as
Well,
much as
I'll be there shortly to mark the exam paper and to score you. But
thank you.
I think it was extraordinary. Well done.
Very good. All right. So I'll talk to you soon, Dad. Thanks for joining.
Take good care, Jamie.
All right. See you, everybody.